My name is Jordan Garrett, and this is my Wwise audio implementation reel I created while studying with the School of Video Game Audio. The goal was to create sound design and music that allowed for a believable and immersive experience without subjecting the player to too much repetition. I used the profiler mode in Wwise to determine which events were being triggered in the game. From this data, I created an asset list which I kept up to date to keep track of what needed to be done. I created the sound design with a combination of live recording and electronic synthesis. I will now look at a few of the sound assets in greater detail to give a better understanding of what I created. The rocket launcher, for example, used both a mixture of sounds that I recorded with my Zoom H4n as well as synthesized sounds in Pro Tools using Native Instruments' massive virtual analog synthesizer. The recorded layer comes from a coffee grinder. I decided that the pitch was too high for a large mechanism like a rocket launcher, so I duplicated the sound and applied pitch shift to one of the layers in order to make the machine sound bigger. I then layered 3 different iterations of the sound to make the machine sound more complex. To create a more impactful launch, I added a bass hit from the Cinematic Synthetic Drums collection by Impact Soundworks. Then, with Massive, I synthesized rocket, thrust, and explosion sounds. To make the explosion more rich, I added a layer of me making an explosion sound with my voice. Another of the sounds I created was the sound of the character's punch. This sound is made up of 5 separate recorded layers. One for the low impact sound, one for the mid-range body layer, and a third layer to create a high-pitched snap. To make the punch more visceral, I added a swoosh sound to the beginning and a squish sound to the end. The last attack sound I'll talk about in detail is the ice ball. One of the enemies, a humanoid called the Knight, shoots a ball of ice as its attack. I decided that the attack needed to sound sharp, so in addition to synthesis, I added a layer of a metal spatula scraping against a pot. Here it is in Pro Tools with reverb added. For the explosion, in addition to electronic synthesis, I recorded the sound of actual ice cracking. For the remainder of the weapon sounds, I used previously existing sound libraries that I altered to sound more powerful, as is to be expected in an action game. For the voices of the player and the monster, I decided to perform the vocalizations myself. The monster voices have been heavily altered using digital signal processing effects in both Pro Tools and Wwise. I also wrote 2 pieces of music for this level that are both inspired by first-person shooter games that were popular in the 1990s, which Cube reminds me of. The first plays when the player is exploring and not engaged in combat. When the player begins fighting a monster, the combat music enters. The 2 pieces of music are based on the same chord progression, tempo, and themes, but the combat music is a much more intense piece, mostly due to the much more active percussion. Now here's a sample playthrough of the level I worked on. Thank you for watching my Wwise audio implementation demo reel.